Clayton Mitchell.
Mr. Speaker, I have to say being beat up by Wikipedia is quite an experience, or just in the spirit of this bill, maybe Coach Bishop, the pre-game speech was quite entertaining. All that has just gone in one ear and out the other. But I do actually have to say that I support some of what you were saying, because I do believe that we are living in a period of harm minimisation, particularly when you compare where we've come from as a society, I've said it before, and where we're heading. And it's all about the vectors on which we're travelling. And if you're heading towards a high propensity for drinking, then of course you're heading towards a binge drinking culture, and quite the opposite. But I diverse. We're going to get into this bill now, Mr. Speaker, and I have to say that I've actually really enjoyed this whole select committee. It's a new one for me, being on justice and electoral. I would particularly like to say I've very much enjoyed the chairing of that, Jackie Dean, and thank you for your very open and very amicable way of chairing those meetings. So congratulations. David Seymour, of course, the person who's put this bill down with his very intoxicating personality, a bit of a Freudian slip there. I do apologise. I can see why he is certainly putting this bill forward, and we certainly know where you'll be, Mr. Seymour, on game day. I just hope we can get you here working as well. But, Mr. Speaker, when we actually got to sit around the table in caucus and debate this in all seriousness, I have to say we had to run the analogy. It felt like 5 minutes to full time. David Seymour put up the high ball, chased it, caught it mid-air and was tackled by the Greens mid-air and got a penalty, which gave him the reprieve that he needed, because he came back the second day, he put the high ball up and he's now running for the line. So, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of people out there just waiting for the outcome of today's voting. He hasn't been tackled yet, but he might be. And I have to say, oh, I lost my voice. Sorry, people back home. That's better. I have to say to those people back home that already the media have come out and said that this bill has gone through. So, look, just goes to show that media don't always get it right, or well, they may well do, but they're certainly ahead of the game in today's standings. And I want to take a little bit of a tact and just discuss the scrum that took place in our caucus discussing this bill, because we took it very, very seriously. And New Zealand First is in a very strong position where we are not wanting to be out there singing from the rooftops that we are trying to liberalise the drinking laws. And we want to also make a mention of the police's good work that they've been doing around the country, but we get back to the ambiguity of the current Liquor Licensing Act 2012. And this just goes to show how clunky and antiquated this current legislation is, and we do actually support the Greens in part of what they've been saying, insofar as we would like to see a review put together to actually get a clearer outline on what constitutes a special licence. Because this is what this is about. This has been some councils, some areas, some police around the country, and I can say openly that Christchurch, from my anecdotal evidence, has been very, very supportive by the police, by the council and by the health department to make sure that the majority of those special licences have actually been granted. And then other parts of the country where the interpretation of what constitutes a special licence has been interpreted another way, where some, what I would consider to be ridiculous insertions into their conditions of opening up for the Rugby World Cup, for example, and we've already heard it in the House, Jackie Dean's already spoken of that, but having a ticketed event, so every game has to be ticketed, to make sure that you've got your staff and your customers dressing up in your rooms, in theme, etc., etc. And yes, dead right, it is in the theme of the game is to make sure that you go to the pub because it's all about the atmosphere. If you can't afford the tickets to ticket up on your credit card to go over and watch them live, sure, you want to be with your mates in the pub where the action really is. Conversely, New Zealand First also equally and oppositely support the fact that all New Zealanders should have the opportunity to watch all of these games live on their TV in the comfort of their lounge with their family, with a cup of tea, a piece of toast, or if they choose, with a beer. But unfortunately, this legislation doesn't quite cover that one off, and we've got some work to do to try and ensure that New Zealanders actually can choose to stay home in the comfort of their home with their family members or a few friends that decide to get up at that time of the morning and watch the game, or conversely go down to the pub and put on their scarves and start making some noise and getting behind the teams that they love. And the teams that they love, of course, they're the All Blacks. But there are many other teams that the people that live in New Zealand support. Tonga, Samoa, France, England. I mean, you want to get behind all the different teams from around the world. And so I do also commend the Select Committee for looking at that objectively and saying, let the market determine what's going to be beneficial for licensed premises to open. That is a common sense approach, because nobody, unless you've got a huge Namibian a group of people in your community to come down to your pub, is going to open up for a Namibia game necessarily, unless of course they're playing the All Blacks. But that is up to each individual licensed premises to work that out of what they're going to open for or what they're not. In Mount Maunganui and Tauranga, we've got a very strong Brazilian community and South American community. Well, there you have it, as well as the English and the Irish. You can see how that's going to manifest. But I have to say that this piece of legislation, which is to adjust and put an amendment into the current legislation, leaves a dirty stain in the legislation that we've got. It's going to leave a blight. It's going to have the Rugby World Cup 2015 as an amendment into this legislation. Now, I feel a little bit uncomfortable moving forward from here and in future opening up this section to go, why are we referring to 2015? Of course, when it gets to 2017 and 18, it's just going to look ridiculous, which is again why I'm asking the Minister, Amy Adams, and I have to say Amy Adams has been fantastic too, Mr. Speaker. She's been very, very accommodating and very open and very supportive of ideas and getting everybody involved. So I would ask her that to look into this and actually resolve this problem so we can get on, because guess what, next year we've got the Olympic Games and the year after that we've got the Football World Cup again. Now I just would like to give you some evidence, and this is not anecdotal because it's absolutely from me. I've been involved in putting together special licence applications for some quite large events. In fact, one of the events I put together was for 17,000 people. And it's a very onerous task on the licensee to actually put a special licence application. And that application was around about 35 pages of what we will and what we won't do to ensure harm is minimised with the consumption of alcohol. And working in with your local authorities and the police is absolutely vital to ensure you get that open dialogue to ensure that the things are actually going to be adhered to. And on a smaller scale, when you're talking about a special licence, and we've been working with licensees in Rotorua with the frustrations that they've been having with getting their special licences through, there's an expectation that they can just put in 9 pages of paperwork and that they're going to get a special licence application. It's up to the licensee to prove what they're going to do to minimise harm and noise and mitigate noise and any other potential problems that may arise from that licensed premises during that special licence event. And to say that 9 pages is enough, look, I've put a small application together and it might be as many as 15 pages to make sure that you've ticked the boxes to get things right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I would have to say that the ownership is on the licensees. I've actually helped put together a schedule which is forming up part, oh goodness me, I'll just find the part that it actually, 45E on page 6, which is to do with the conditions. And there's 3 conditions that we believe will actually help mitigate problems associating and arising from those licensed premises. And that's around noise. So what we're suggesting is closing off your outside courtyards or your smoking areas for a licensed premises is within the confines for the time of the day that they're going to be operating is not unfair or unreasonable. And I think that is actually a good condition that I would think that people, communities and licensees would actually think is fair and reasonable. The second thing, if anybody's lived in a city or near a licensed premises, the absolute shocking noise that some outlets get when they tip their rubbish out, bottles and cans going into other bottles and cans, can absolutely startle people. And I've lived in Wellington a couple of times and goodness me, I've been woken up at odd times of the morning. And so we've actually put this into the legislation to ensure that people get a good night's sleep in their area. And I think that's another point that needs to be very heavily considered. And of course, quite simply, to make sure that amplified music outside your premises is switched off. So those are three conditions. Now, over and above that, a noise mitigation plan needs to be submitted by the licensee. So other steps that they can take is about getting customers away from their premises and getting them to their premises quickly and quietly with no fuss. And that could be done with signage, a coordinated taxi removal plan, making sure that your staff and security are actually outside at the front to make sure people's voices are kept down nice and low. So these are the sorts of things that licensees can actually come out and take part of, making sure that they don't become a nuisance within their community, because that's not what this is designed for. This is a dog's breakfast. This is a tiny little wee a band-aid on a bigger problem that we'd like to see resolved. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The members' time has expired. Can I just ask the Maori Party, Labour and National, because we've already had, I think, clear positions that there will be party rather than conscience votes from the Greens and New Zealand First and Act, to indicate that, because clearly the chairs have got to, the chair at the time will have to take a decision about whether we have a personal vote. So if parties can indicate their approach to it.